FM.
On the other side of my screen, Aaron Fowler. He's doing his own podcast at the moment, Disability Sports Podcast, from last year to the present day. And he's also a physiotherapist for the NHS. So welcome along, Aaron.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you very much for having me. It's lovely to come along and chat to you.
So going back into your youth, as I normally do, what was your sporting career growing up?
Yeah, I loved sport growing up. My first love was probably football. I think from the age of about 4 or 5, I remember kind of, loving football. My dad's a big Liverpool fan. My granddad's a Scouser, so kind of, most of my family are Liverpool fans. So grew up supporting them. Played for a local team from the age of about 5. Football was always the main sport I played, and then when I got to sort of any chance I got to play any sport, I would. Got to secondary school and played for most of our school teams. We played things like hockey, athletics, cross country. Played a little bit of rugby and and anything I could get my hands on really. And then when I was about 15, so I'm visually impaired, and when I was about 15, my eyesight kind of started to deteriorate quite a lot. And playing, mainstream sports visually was getting a lot harder. So I then started playing blind cricket, basically. And so that was one of the best things I ever did because, it allowed me a chance to sort of play on an even playing field. And then throughout my cricketing career, I was lucky to play as an opening batsman for Hampshire and Surrey blind cricket teams, and had trials with the England team for about a year as well. But like I say, growing up, massive sports fan, football and rugby probably the main ones, and big Liverpool and Harlequins fan, and still am today.
But you mentioned that you do blind cricket. How does it work? Because I know in some blind sports you've got like some sort of bell in a ball. So how does cricket get played then?
Yeah, so the domestic game of blind cricket is played with a ball that's a size 3 football. So like a standard football is size 5. So a size 3 is somewhere between a football and a normal size cricket ball. It has ball bearings in it, so it makes it audible. Within visually impaired sports, you have different sight classifications. So you have like a B1, who is a player with no sight, and it goes up to B4, who is the highest level of sighted player that's eligible to play. The bound, because the ball's bigger, obviously it's harder to hit as far as a normal cricket ball, so the boundary is a bit shorter. The stumps are a bit bigger, so they're sort of big white stumps. After the bowler, before the bowler bowls the ball, they have to ask the batsman if they're ready. They have to wait for the batsman to say yes, and then once the batsman said yes, then the bowler can release the ball, and as they release the ball, they have to shout play so that everyone knows the ball is in play. B1s, who are the players with no sight, if they score double runs, basically, so if they score a 4, it will count as 8. And equally in the domestic game, if the ball bounces once and the B1 catches the ball, then you would be out. But everyone else has to, catch it, like in mainstream cricket, in the air. So and then at international level, so the game is slightly different at international level. At international level, it's played with a ball that's about the size of a hockey ball, and it's bowled underarm. Again, it has ball bearings in it to make it audible, and the ball can basically the ball has to bounce once either side of the middle of the crease. When it's bowled. The boundary, I think, is slightly bigger in the international game, and the ball can be bowled a bit faster. I think the top bowler is probably up to around sort of 65, 70 miles an hour. That's the sort of brief summary of the rules, I guess.
And so when you turned 15, you also started deteriorating. Was that progression over time? Because you weren't born with it; it was just something that just happened.
Most likely I was born with it. So I've got a condition called retinitis pigmentosa. It's a condition which predominantly causes tunnel vision and night blindness. It affects the retina in the eye, which is the light sensitive part. I was diagnosed when I was 5 years old, but it's it's likely I was born with it, to be honest, but it just wasn't picked up until I was 5. My parents noticed that perhaps I wasn't very confident in the dark, or I'd bump into things a bit more often, RP, I'll call it RP for short, affects people at different rates. For some people their sight stays stable for many years, other people lose it very quickly. Like I say, when I was about 14, probably from the ages of 14 to 21 is when it deteriorated the most. Touch with the last few years, it's been fairly stable, but I have about 5% vision of what a fully sighted person has, basically. And like I say, it may not stay how it is now forever, or in 5 years, 10 years, it could completely go. There's just no knowing.
So we go into your school and college, university, all of that. So you what did you do for your GCSEs and A levels? Because I know you went to university. We'll talk about it a little bit, but what was school like for you? What was your main passions back then?
I really enjoyed school. I was lucky to had some great friends who a lot of my best friends are still my mates from school. My favourite subject was PE. Sport was my biggest passion, so I did PE at GCSE. I also did music, so I played a little bit of guitar. Can't confess to being very good, but enjoyed that. Play the drums occasionally these days when I get the chance, but music is one of my other passions. And I studied history and food tech, which was quite funny because I'm not particularly a good chef. So and then obviously I did your usual maths, English, and science at GCSE. School wise, my sight, like I say, my sight was fairly stable at school, so I never really had any extra support until I got to GCSEs, and then I had I think it was like 25% extra time for exams because of my sight. Obviously, it takes longer to read. When there's lots of text to read, it takes longer to read and write. And then I went to Farnborough Sixth Form College in Hampshire, which is a sort of huge, sixth form college, probably about 3,000 students. And I studied PE, psychology, human biology. I did all of those at A level, and I did an AS level in modern history. And then college, again, college was kind of similar. I had extra time for exams, but didn't really use anything else at that time. It was more when I went to university that I'd start to use other things, to assist me with my studies, from a visual point of view.
So I remember when he said 25%, I'm going to stick it out as well. So I'm assuming this was 25% extra time in the room by yourself with someone else supporting you. Was that what you had as well?
No, so I didn't have anyone supporting me. I think I did have that option. I think sort of when I went to university, but no, I would have my exam papers enlarged. Actually, that's another thing. Yeah, I'd have the exam papers enlarged, so that obviously it's in large print. So excuse me. Sorry. Oh, apologies. Sorry. I'd had my exam papers enlarged, but I didn't have anyone there to assist me. It was just the extra time and that. And I think when I went to university, because my sight had deteriorated quite a lot more, I think I then had 50% extra time in exams.
Okay. And so obviously your job, so 2000 and 2013, I was just about approaching my teenage years at that point. But you went to the University of Hampshire after your college A levels and all that, and you did a BSc with honours in physiotherapy. So what made you want to go down that route, the physiotherapist route?
Do you know what? I don't know if I necessarily ever was really like, I really want to be a physio. It was something that I sort of went into. I think when I was younger, a lot of people around me, sort of family, teachers, things like that, who all obviously had very good intentions, kind of suggested, and not knowing what would happen in my sight, kind of obviously suggested that it'd be good to kind of do a career that you could kind of carry on with should the worst, I guess, happen with my sight. I've always loved sport, as I say. I quite like sort of biology. I like doing a job where I can help people. I've always been someone who likes to help people, I guess. And so they're probably the sort of main reasons I went into physio. I didn't really know what else I wanted to do at that point, I guess. And so that's why I guess I sort of went into it. Like I say, went to Hertfordshire Uni, graduated in 2013. Physio is a very demanding degree. That's one thing I would say. I was 18 when I went to university, but physiotherapy, you're in, sort of maximum number of hours you can be for lectures, and then you have to treat it as a full-time job. And to be honest, if you want to do well, then you probably need to treat it as more than a full-time job, because especially when you're on placement, you've got lots of assignments to do. So when you're a student, you go and work in hospital. So my first placement was like ICU and respiratory, so you're kind of thrown in at the deep end on your placements like that. But I enjoyed my studies. I loved my time at university. Had some great friends. Enjoyed student life as well. Fond memories of uni, definitely.
And was there many universities that you looked into? Was there a particular reason why you chose the University of Hertfordshire?
Yeah, so after my first year of college, I found the transition from GCSE to sort of A level very hard, and so I didn't have particularly good grades at the end of my first year. And I think to get into physio at the time, most unis were sort of 3Bs, I think was the general kind of thing. So with the help of my parents, sort of ended up emailing around different universities to see where would kind of consider me if I applied. Had good response from a few unis. So I applied to Hertfordshire, Brighton, Bournemouth, and West of England Uni in Bristol. And the reason I chose Hertfordshire in the end was a few reasons really. One, I was put in touch with a lady called Sarah, who was a vision impaired physio who had graduated a few years before I started there. So the uni had obviously already had experience of having a vision impaired student, which was good. I met up with university. I can't remember sort of her exact title, but universities normally have, like, if you have a disability, they'll have like a sort of like a learning, like a department to assist people, with disabilities with their studies and things. And so she works there, and she had a husband who was visually impaired, and they knew someone who I knew mutually through playing blind cricket. And so there was that connection there as well. And I just got the best vibe, I think, when I went there. And it was a campus university, so everything was kind of within easy access. And when being visually impaired, getting around at night can be quite difficult. So that was a nice aspect to it as well. Ultimately, I liked the people when I looked around. I liked the lecturers, had a good feel about the place. Ultimately, that's, I guess, why that was my first choice. I had offers from Brighton and West of England Uni as well, Hertfordshire was my favourite, and that's why I ended up going there, really.
And I was just looking, and there seems to be a bit of a gap here. I think you could probably fill me in. So 2019 and 2014, that seems only a blank year. It seems like you did nothing. I'm assuming you did something between those years.
Absolutely. When I finished university, I applied for like a couple of physio roles, but I wasn't really sure if it was what I wanted to continue with. I think part of it was just, like I say, I was just very young when I went into it. It's a very full-on profession, which I think, in hindsight, you're better off studying when you're a little bit older. Equally, though, when I went for a few interviews, the first question I always got asked is like, well, what can you see? It was never about, I never felt like it was about my ability as a physio. It was always about my sight first. And I think as an industry, it just kind of put me off, and I just kind of thought, forget this. This isn't an industry I want to work in. And I was working, though, after I finished uni, my dad was a director of a logistics company, and so I was just working full time, kind of there until I was, sort of found a physio job or could decide what I wanted to do. And then one thing I had thought about before I went to uni was doing sports journalism, and I went along to News Associates, which is a journalism training school in London. Have the best pass rates of anywhere that did do the NCTJ courses. And I really loved the workshop I did there. It was a lot of fun. That was in about May 2014, so I'd been working full time until this point. really, at the logistics company, and then kind of going along to this workshop kind of confirmed that I wanted to, pursue the sports journalism. There was certainly no hard sell from news associates either when we were there. They obviously told us about their courses, and I just got a really good vibe with the place. And I basically applied for the course, did some work experience, set up my own blog, just like a lot of students probably do before they go to uni, just kind of practicing your match reports and sports reports and things like that. I got obviously accepted onto the course at News Associates, had a absolutely fantastic time, doing journalism. I really made the most of every opportunity I think I had there. I did, throughout that year, I did work experience at local newspapers. I did work experience at places like 442, TalkSport, Sky Sports News at the end of the year, Sports Beat. Through Sports Beat, we get the chance to go and cover, non-league games, football league games. I covered the World Diving Series. And my course, actually, we were the first ever NCTJ course where everyone on the course passed everything, like 100% pass rate. So everyone passed shorthand. So, and as someone who's visually impaired and can only see 5% of what everyone else sees, I was very proud that I was able to pass shorthand and pass before a few other people did as well. So, I had my guide dog Banwell at the time as well, and I think he was probably the most popular person in the class, to be honest. So, had a really good time there.
And so, what made you want to go from physio? What was it about journalism that made you want to do it as a long-term route at the time?
I obviously, as I've mentioned, sports always been my biggest passion, and if I'm not playing sport, I'm probably either watching it or talking about it. Obviously, sports journalism is great. You get to watch lots of sports, and you get to interview lots of sports people. Go to some great events. If you're a sports fan, it's great. Obviously, it's different when you're working at an event or something like that to sort of being a fan. But and I also quite enjoyed the buzz of covering a game or a live event and having to get a match report or a sports report in on time, things like that. And I love people as well. I read, most of the books I read are autobiographies. I've always been very interested in people and their stories and what makes someone who they are. And obviously, journalism is a real privilege in that sense, because people tell you their stories and they let you in and you're able to connect with people. And that was another reason I think I really enjoyed it.
Did you ever, so when you're watching the match, do you ever forget that you're meant to be reporting on it, and you just get so involved in the match that you forget that you're actually there to do a job?
Do you know? I don't think so. But if you, I mean, with the games I covered, I don't really remember there ever being, like, most of them were like a sort of like a 1-1 or a 2-1. There was never like a really exciting like 5-3 or I never covered like a Liverpool game, for example. Obviously it would probably be harder if it's your own team to hold in that excitement. But I started off covering like some non-league games, and then once you've done a few non-league games, you then got a chance to cover a few football league games. So I enjoyed that. That was really good, as well as doing a few other things. Like I say, it was great. You get to access to these events for free. You're there, you watch the game. Obviously you're working, but it was lots of fun. The atmosphere at football is always amazing as well.
So you graduated in 2015 from the NCTJ Multimedia Sports Journalism Diploma. Then that year, it was between that 2015 for a year you went on to Sky. So was that one of those sort of work experience type things that you just carried on doing?
Yeah, so the two main places I worked at after my course was TalkSport. So in February of 2015, I did work experience at TalkSport. We had a month out of our coursework that was for work experience. I went to TalkSport for the week. I think the person who was supposed to be like the phone operative, so the person who kind of like takes the calls from listeners, who phone in because they want to go on air and put their point across, or the person that phones the guests up to get them ready for the show, kind of hadn't come in, so they said, sort of showed me what to do. Said, do you fancy giving it a go? And so I did that for one or two of the shows, and then got offered some the odd shift here and there, and eventually over time, started to get offered a lot more shifts there, which was really nice. And then in July of 2015, I did work experience at Sky Sports News. And yeah, it was really fortunate, had a great time there, met some lovely people, and then was fortunate to get offered some freelance work, sort of predominantly working with the planning team there. So they would sort of help plan what stories the channel were going to cover and sort of do background research for reporters, helping set up accreditation and things like that. And I'd always been, growing up, I'd always been kind of glued to Sky Sports News. So it was, quite amazing and a real privilege to, get a chance to sort of do a bit of work at, a place I'd always loved watching. Over time, I started to get more work at TalkSport, and then gradually, got a chance to do some assistant producing at TalkSport as well. Probably worked on most of the shows there, to be honest. I think whilst I was there, I think I worked on pretty much all the shows. But predominantly, I worked on as a phone operative. I predominantly worked on like Drive and Kickoff, as an assistant producer, sort of started, works on quite a few, and it was really lucky. And then I stayed working at those two places until about summer of 2016. But then, to be honest, I just wasn't in the best place mentally. I think, lots of things had kind of happened in my life at the time. Kind of, was in a bit of a bad on and off relationship at the time. Just work as well. Like I was just always working. It wouldn't be weird. Some days I would get in at midnight from TalkSport and be up at 6 to go, get the train to do a shift at Sky. Or some days I'd work like 12 days in a row. But then when I wasn't working, I was always running my website or doing radio. So I just never had a life away from journalism. And I think ultimately just had a bit of a kind of a meltdown and just made the wrong decision. But I guess everything happens for a reason, doesn't it? So I then left, decided to get a job at Guide Dogs, working at a charity. So I had my Guide Dog Banwell. It was probably a mistake looking back. I didn't feel challenged in my role at Guide Dogs, but great charity to work with some lovely people. But like I said, I gave up the journalism for the wrong reasons. So I stayed at Guide Dogs for probably about 16 months. I think we're talking about December 2017, and then I sort of tried going back into journalism, just doing some freelance shifts at Sky again. Also did some sort of freelance sort of communications and sort of an event kind of organising roles at Disabilty, basically another charity.
And then on the Sky again, I mentioned communications and fundraising in 2018, and so you mentioned your website. That was 2015 to 2020.
Yep.
Was there a particular reason why it ended? In 2020. COVID, was it?
No, just so I set up my website. That was about May or June 2015. I never set out in journalism with the goal necessarily of like promoting disability sports. It was something I guess that I was important to me, but I think as time went on, someone with a disability, it's like you just realize that there really was so much limited coverage. So my goal was to became I just found I had a real passion for wanting to try and increase the media coverage of disability sports. And I looked at websites around, and apart from like the Paralympics, hardly any of them report on there. The BBC had a little bit at the time, but it's a tiny section, and a lot of it is just press releases that are turned around and things like that. And to be honest, when I set up my website called the Disability Sports News. Sorry, it was just called Disability Sports News. And over time, if you put in Disability Sports News in Google, it'd be the first thing that would come up, and probably had more content than anywhere else online. And I did all of that in my own time, on top of obviously working and being very busy. So the reason I stopped in 2020 was I went back into physio in 2019, and just didn't have the time to be able to carry on with it, unfortunately. Obviously news is when you're doing articles, news is obviously a time thing. So if you don't get an article out as soon as something happens, it then kind of almost becomes irrelevant if you put it out a few days later. So where I was working full time in physio, I didn't have the time to be able to commit to it, unfortunately.
If you leave it on, if you pull up if you wait for a long time, it then becomes old news and something else happens. So there's always that danger of it happening.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then you mentioned you went back into your physio. It's 2022 now. So you mentioned before that you probably didn't want to earn on your career, but obviously you got your degree in it. So what was it about physio that want to come back into the physio world?
So do you know what it was? This was probably in about 20, sort of towards the end of 2018, early 2019. I was still sort of freelancing at sort of Sky and everything, but I just felt like I kind of needed a full-time job. I wanted to be earning, having a regular income. Freelancing's okay, but you don't know what work you got sort of 1 month to the next and things like that. And I was going to. There's a charity called Blind in Business who basically help blind and vision impaired people, kind of get into work. They're based in London, and I started going up to their offices just as a place to kind of get out of the house, to be able to apply for jobs, get help with like CV, things like that. And there was a lad there whose name I have this is really bad. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but he was basically interested in studying physiotherapy at Hertfordshire University, and he's vision impaired. And obviously, I went to Hertfordshire, and he was asking me lots of questions about that. And it was that really that kind of sparked my interest in getting back into it. Really, journalism is obviously a very competitive field. A lot of the work out there is freelance or part-time contracts, things like that. Whereas physio, there's a lot more opportunities out there as well. It's a career where you're always developing, you're always learning. And so I then sort of applied for some physio assistant roles. Got offered a couple of jobs. Decided to take one working on orthopedics at my local hospital, which was Frimley Park, based in Camberley in Surrey. Sort of went from there really. First sort of few months probably wasn't the best kind of in terms of support and management at that where I was working at the time, probably wasn't the best, to be honest. Things did improve, but so I just started to have doubts whether I'd kind of, again, when I went for an interview, the first question was what can you see, and it's like, it was just like, okay, is this the right thing? But sorry Fitz, I'll let you go.
Oh, no. I was just still, we're still asking that sort of question, but yeah.
But I was going to say, one of the best things so when I got back into physio, I should point out, I think I said I was working as a physio assistant at the time. So when you're a physiotherapist or another health profession, you have to register with the HCPC, which is the Healthcare Professions Council. Because since qualifying, I hadn't actually worked as a physio, I had to do what's called a return to practice. So you basically have to either do like some self-study or work under the supervision of a qualified physio, do some courses, things like that, which you have to kind of put in like your continuing professional development portfolio. And I had to do 60 days, but I did mine kind of mainly as working as a physio assistant. So after about 14 months working as a physio assistant, I decided to apply to get my registration back for the HCPC to work as a physio. I'd worked as an assistant for a lot longer than I needed to, but I felt that I would probably know, when the time was right to move on. And one of the best things, it kind of sounds strange, but in terms of my career progression, one of the best things that ever happened was COVID, because I was working on an orthopedic ward, but when COVID hit, I was redeployed to like a elderly sort of rehab ward at Farnham Hospital, which is like a community hospital. So patients go there because they need more support, with their mobility, to improve their independence with their washing and dressing, kitchen tasks, things like this. And because a lot of people got redeployed during COVID, a lot of the physios I was working with were from musculoskeletal outpatients. So working in outpatients and on the ward can be quite different, because on the ward you have to do a lot of what we call sort of manual handling, so it's use of hoists, standing aids, things like this. And because I'd worked on the wards for like the past sort of well, 10 months, whatever it was at that time. I was quite confident just getting stuck in. So I actually found myself kind of being able to lead sessions with some sort of senior physios who hadn't worked on the ward for a bit. And that really kind of gave me the confidence. And my manager, lady called Charmaine, who I was kind of working under at that time, knew that I was kind of looking to get my registration back. And she was really supportive in allowing me to kind of go along to sort of some meetings to sort of see what the physios did in meetings, and just things that would help me develop. And so in that sense I was really fortunate. Like I say, it was that gave me that confidence. So actually, in terms of career progression, I think that COVID was one of the best things that could have happened, really, which sounds a bit strange, but obviously COVID isn't a good thing, but it was you have to take the positives, I guess.
And you're working in the NHS of Berkshire, is it? North Berkshire?
Yes. So I now work in Berkshire,
And so, was there any particular area of physio that you wanted to go into, or was it just anyone that you wanted to go into?
I think when I was sort of a bit earlier on in my career, I always thought it'd probably be like musculoskeletal outpatients. I think really more from a visual point of view, and also it's sort of the area you kind of associate with sport really as well. Generally if you're a physio who wants to specialise in sport, you'll probably sort of do some MSK physio first, and then get experience in sport. So I got my registration back in July 2020, and then got offered a junior physio role in my current trust, which is in Berkshire. My first rotation, so as a junior physio, you normally do rotations for somewhere between 4 to 6 months in different departments, depending on which trust you work in. So I sort of worked at Wokingham Hospital on a rehab ward. So again, you see quite a variety of patients. It can be patients that have fallen, fractured their hips, or it could be patients with MS, or occasionally you may get an amputee patient. It's a real can be a real variety of things. And really enjoyed it there. Again, obviously we're still talking when COVID was around, so obviously we still had some lockdowns at the end of 2020. It had its challenges, but my manager who I worked with, I found really supportive. It was really great. Someone I sort of just felt like I clicked with, kind of liked her teaching style as well. So I think that's always really good when you've got, and had a really good team around us as well, with quite a lot of like experienced physios, and just really nice people to work with. So really enjoyed my time there. And then my rotation obviously there eventually came to an end, and then I went to musculoskeletal outpatients. But I did a sort of rotation there as a junior physio, and then did a secondment for a year. But found MSK very challenging. It's very demanding. You're kind of back to back, with patients, and it's very challenging. But it was, good learning experience. Glad I did it, but realised that perhaps it probably wasn't the area that I wanted to be in. Like I say, no regrets. You have to try these things. And then I went back onto my rotations July last year, and then I've been back on rehab ward since, and for about the last year now I've been working. I did a secondment as a senior physio, and then in March I got my first sort of permanent role as a senior physio, working back on the rehab wards at Wokingham. So that's where I currently am, and enjoying it again. Have a nice manager who is very experienced, who is good for learning from, and with a nice team of people. So it's good. Obviously the NHS has its challenges. It's kind of obviously well documented in the news that obviously there are quite a lot of vacancies in the NHS. So obviously I think most teams in the NHS are under those sort of pressures at times. But I think the NHS is a great organisation that we should try to preserve, and what's more important than your health at the end of the day.
Especially in its 75th anniversary year as well.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned that you were doing it throughout COVID. I'm assuming you were one of the vulnerable part. You weren't part of that.
No. So I was someone that was going to work every day, working with obviously COVID patients. Because I worked on the rehab ward, we still had a lot of patients who were obviously very badly affected by COVID. It probably wasn't, it wouldn't have been as demanding as like the staff working on, say, ICU. I think there's no doubt those guys probably had the real toughest job during COVID. But I think everyone, the way everyone pulled together during that time, and people were redeployed from different departments, but everyone just got on with it and worked really well, and everyone got behind the NHS, didn't they? They had like the Catholic carers, local businesses would bring in food for the staff, and so it was great. It felt like people really valued the NHS at the time, whereas it kind of feels like it's kind of going back to how it was, and people kind of take it for granted a little bit, maybe. I don't know.
So, and then you're still doing the physio now, I should just say, before we go on to your current sort of like side job or side hobby or whatever you want to call it. You're the host of the Disability Sport podcast. I'm assuming it's some sort of like sister show to Disability Sport News, but you just changed the last bit to podcast.
Well, do you know what it was? I'd been toying with the idea for a couple of years, really, I guess, about sort of starting a podcast. So I used to, probably from 2014 to 2018, 2019, I used to co-host a show on an online radio station called the Disability Sports Network. So that was a radio station that was online, and it was run by some visually impaired guys in Australia. Me and a lady called Fiona did a UK-based show, and we would interview, athletes from various disability sports. I really used to really enjoy doing the radio show. And then, like I said, I've been toying with the idea of doing a podcast, but didn't really know how to, do like all the editing and things like that. So I did an online, just like a free online course. And learn how to use things like Audacity and things like that. I play visually impaired rugby, so I play for the England team. So I asked my Jack, captain of our side, lad who I've played rugby with for a few years, if he'd be happy to sort of be a guinea pig and be the first person that I got to interview. And obviously, really enjoyed that episode, as obviously Jack's someone I've got to know him quite well, and have the privilege of playing rugby with over the last few years. And obviously great to get word out about a sport that we love. Just kind of blossomed from there, really. I've really been enjoyed doing it. I try to release an episode every 2 weeks. It can be challenging at times, obviously, on top of working full time. I mean, obviously, Peter, you do a podcast, so I'm sure you're very aware that obviously, with doing a podcast, there's the arranging the interviews, doing the editing, uploading it, sharing it out on social media. So I'd say you're looking at sort of between 5 to 10 hours an episode by the time you've done all of those things, sharing it out, trying to get word out there, things like that. The good thing is, the podcast is always growing, it's always sort of getting more people listening to it. I think I've done 21 episodes, I think I've done now. I've had, a few people, most of my guests, I'd say probably about 3/4 of the guests, 2/3 of people I've approached to ask to come on, but then equally I've had probably 1/4 of the guests have been either like organisations like sports governing bodies that have approached me and said, oh, have you ever so like Boccia, for example, I interviewed David Smith, and I'd heard of Boccia, but I hadn't, it wasn't a sport I'd yet covered. I had a email from a lady who does a lot of the sort of helps with the press stuff for them, and she said, but I'd be interested in interviewing David, and I was like, yeah, definitely, it's a new sport I haven't covered, and that's what I want to do is try and cover as many different sports as I can. And I always think, like, when you I don't know about you, Peter, but like when you interview someone, I always think the most interesting people I interview are people whose stories I don't know anything about already, because you learn so much from them. Everyone I've interviewed so far has been really interesting, but a few of my favourites, someone like Nick Kennedy, so we all saw the Wheelchair Rugby League back in like November time when it was on the telly. But then you've also got Physical Disability Rugby League, which was on TV the other night because Adam Hills did a show on it. But I interviewed a guy called Nick Kennedy, who plays for the England side, and they won their World Cup last year. And he was just, really infectious guy, really positive attitude. I loved his game. And it's people like that you interview. Really interesting, and like I said, just enjoy something I enjoy doing in my spare time, and it helps get people's stories out there and hopefully promotes disability sports as well. So I
should just say time of recording. So today is the 16th of August. This isn't coming out till, I don't know, end of September, beginning of October. So at time of recording, you've done 21 episodes. I'm pretty sure by the time this comes out, you would have done at least another 2 or 3 by then. So just to let everyone know that it's not actually 21, it's 21 now instead of. And yeah, so what made you actually want to start doing it? You toyed with the idea, but when did you went, well, I'm definitely doing this. I'm getting into this mindset of actually starting it.
So part of it was probably because as I mentioned earlier, previously I was working in musculoskeletal outpatients, and that was a lot more demanding, and there's probably a lot more sort of self-study and reading, outside of work that was kind of needed. Whereas when I went back onto the water, it's an environment I'm a bit more comfortable in, and there's still lots to learn and things like that. But I feel like I have a better sort of work-life balance, and it was then that I was like, do you know what, like, just got to go for it and try it, and at the end of the day, like, sometimes I put pressure on myself and think, oh, I really want to grow my podcast, I want it to be this great thing, but like, actually, do you know what, like, if I just focus on enjoying it and just doing it for the fun of it, then like actually everything else will just kind of take care of itself. Like if people, if some people will like it, some people might not like it, but at the end of the day, if I'm enjoying it and if it's helping to get people's stories out there, and the nicest thing I think is when I get nice feedback from like the people that I interview. Sometimes they'll say that it was really nice because I'll ask questions perhaps a bit more in depth that maybe if they've been interviewed by sort of journalists from other media organizations, like they don't go in depth. Sometimes maybe other journalists don't have as much knowledge of the sport or disability sports in general. I don't know, but yeah, so it's I think, like I say, one of the nicest things is if you get nice feedback from the people you interview. Some of the people I've had on the podcast, the people that I interviewed, maybe sort of 8-9 years ago, people like Chris Skelly, the GB vision impaired judo athlete, Karen Seal as well, former blind captain of the England blind cricket team. I did an article for 442 when I was on work experience there and interviewed him for that. So it was really nice to like catch up with these people whose careers obviously I've kind of followed, since I first interviewed them, just sort of following through it via social media or the Paralympics and things like that. So yeah, it's a real privilege to kind of catch up with people like that and for them to share their stories with you as well. So.
And I think you can tell that I'm doing the same too. I'm getting into depth with everything that you're doing. You can probably tell. So yeah, and so we're gonna go on to the future. I mean, obviously, physiotherapy will still be part of the future. I'm assuming.
Yeah, I honestly, what I'll be doing in 10 years' time, I couldn't say. I think at the moment, what I'd say is I'm just a bit more content in life. I think when I was younger, like I say, I did physio. That was very demanding. I was then did a, I mean, you just coming to the end of your sports journalism course, and how demanding, doing an NCTJ course is, especially with like learning the shorthand. That was, more than a full-time job, definitely. So I think, I did some very intense stuff when I was young. So I think the last few years I've probably just kind of enjoyed being a bit more content and just kind of having a bit of a slightly better work-life balance as well. So I don't necessarily have like a 5-10 year goal. I think it's obviously I want to do well at whatever I'm doing and continue to progress. But equally, I think the biggest thing for me now is doing something that kind of makes me happy. All jobs have their ups and downs. Don't get me wrong, but if you enjoy something more than you don't, then that's certainly a positive. I think, like I say, one thing I really love doing my podcast. If that could ever get to the point where, could start earning some money from it, and maybe say you did that 1 day a week and physio 4 days a week, that that would be great. If there was ever a chance to get back into journalism, but getting paid to report on disability sport, that's probably I would probably rather do that than be a physio perhaps. But these things are probably still quite a long way off. I mean, it's only in recent years that women's sport has getting the coverage it deserves. But I think one of the things that I've briefly touched on, if it's right for me, just to mention, Peter, is obviously, like I said, I play vision impaired rugby. Our sport only started in 2016, and so I was lucky enough to go out to Japan to play for the England side in 2019. We won our series out there, and then unfortunately COVID put a stop to a couple of international series that was going to take place. But this year we're going over to France to play in a international tournament in October down in Marseille and Toulon against I think it'll be France, Ireland and Wales, I think, and then hopefully a possible series over here at some point, either later this year or sort of early part of next year. I think Japan maybe. coming across. So really exciting times. I've always been a massive rugby fan, so to have the chance to play for your country is fantastic. And play with a great bunch of lads, and the sport's continuing to grow. So there's a charity called the Change Foundation based in London who basically started vision impaired rugby. They do a lot of sporting projects and programs for people from disadvantaged backgrounds, and they've done a fantastic job of growing the game, and it's exciting to be a part of and exciting to see where it can go.
And so how did you get involved with that then?
So I first came across it probably about 2016, but because of sort of work and things at the time, I didn't really have time to get to it. But then it was probably in about 2019. I just thought, do you know what? Like, let's go and give it a go. I didn't know what to expect. I'd never seen vision impaired rugby before. There was a series in 2017 where the Change Foundation took a team over to New Zealand to play. So I'd sort of seen clips of it on YouTube and thought, I'd love to get involved. And then I went along, made contact with Alex Basson, who's one of the main guys at the Change Foundation who's been involved with developing the sport and overseeing the program. And really enjoyed my first training session. Guys I met were all great. Sort of had a real love for the game. Found out obviously that there was a tour, going to Japan, but they'd already kind of selected the team at that point because they'd already held the trials. But it just so happened that I think someone couldn't go, and then I got called to say, are you still interested in coming and would you like to go to Japan? So I was very fortunate to get that chance, and something that I've tried to hold on to ever since. Really, I've sort of now play at scrum half, and it's a position I really enjoy and want to try and kind of keep making the England team for as long as I can. I'm 31 now, so there's some people younger than me in the side. There's a few older than me as well, but as you get older, obviously the harder it is when you're playing with people that are maybe 10 years younger than you. So that's always my motivation when I'm in the gym, is to keep getting better, keep getting trying to be fitter and do the best I can to keep the position. So like I say, it's just grown from there. So.
And how much longer do you think you've got left in the sport, or is just going to see where it goes? Or
I think at least until I'm 40. I don't see why not. I think like I say, as long as I keep myself fit. Part of it depends on site as well. Touch with my site will be stable. I'm a B2, so it's sort of one of the lower site classifications. As long as I can keep myself fit, keep developing, keep having a good work ethic when I'm playing, and skill wise trying to improve all the time, hopefully can have a long career in it. I love rugby, and I'm very motivated to keep developing and hopefully keep doing well for the team and helping the sport to develop as well. So
Well, feels like a good place to stop. But thank you very much for coming on, Aaron.
Thank you very much for having me.
Voice. Let's go. Voice FM.